Good day, everybody. This is Emar Silvertooth, and welcome to another edition of the Verbal Submission Podcast. Glad that you're able to be with us on April 2nd, 2021. We have a full show for you. We'll delve into the New Japan Pro Wrestling New Japan Cup tournament, my thoughts on that, and the subsequent results. We'll then transition to AEW. A lot has happened in that federation since our last show. We'll have a lot to discuss on there. We'll transition to WWE. They had their Fastlane pay-per-view a few weeks ago, and we're starting to get a clear picture of what's going on in the world of the preparing for Wrestlemania. And then at the end of our show, we may delve into some mixed martial arts. UFC have had some events since our last show, and some new no new champions, but some championship competition for matches for belts that have taken place. I have some opinions on what has transpired. As always, if you want to follow everything that we're doing, head to the mothership, thesportsinquirer.net. If you go on the site, you'll see some of our shows, such as the Sports Inquirer show. We did one earlier this week. If you want my thoughts on the NCAA tournament on the men's side and women's side, my thoughts on the transactions in the NFL with the draft coming up later on this month in April. I even do my beanball show, or beanball portion of the show, which previews the Major League Baseball season. All of that is on our latest edition of the Sports Inquirer show, so make sure you do a job and go onto the site and check that out. You'll also see our interviews with various entities. I'll pull it up right now as we're speaking, so I'll make sure we get it right. Yeah, as I said, we were able to speak to several people, including Georgia Tech volleyball head coach Michelle Caillet before their matches this weekend as they compete for the ACC championship. We're also able to speak with a player and a coach, Bailey Showers, the assistant coach, and Andre Duarte from Georgia State men's tennis, and that those interviews are up on the site right now, and other content that you will surely enjoy. So make sure you check that out. On social media, you can go to Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook and search for us on there, and you will find us on the site. And every time we do an update on the site, whether it is an interview, whether it's a presser, anything along those lines, you head to the site or you head to our social media platforms. It's automatically posted on there. So that is a great way to keep track of everything that we're doing. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iTunes, and search for us on the Sports Inquirer, and you will see everything that we have going on. So those are the best ways to track everything we have going on. All right, let's transition and start off with New Japan Pro Wrestling. They did their New Japan Cup tournament, and I guess the best way to do it, I looked at it from kind of from the semifinals on down, and I think that if I do it that way, you will be able to kind of see my opinions of where things are and kind of where their direction that they're going, as Genesis actually takes place this weekend with Will Osprey fighting or being the main contender, the number one contender for the New Japan World Heavyweight Championship. I have to get used to saying that because we had a merger of the belts with the Ibushi currently holding it. We'll get to that when we do our preview of the main event. But there was the evil portion of the show. He made it to the semifinals. And my thoughts on the evil bracket, Great Khan being Naito was a surprise, but excuse the purpose of the event. When Naito is one of my favorite wrestlers, and I think he's still a contender for the World Championship. But I think the New Japan Cup did serve its purpose in elevating some guys. Unlike the G1, where it's a round robin kind of tournament with points, and you have to face everyone in your bracket. The true best people emerge from that. When you have the New Japan Cup, it's a single elimination tournament. It lends itself more towards upsets. It's kind of similar to the NCAA basketball tournament for basketball that we're having going on right now. It's 68 teams, single elimination. If it was as opposed to the NBA, where it has the playoffs, which is a best of 4 wins out of 7. It's the best of 7 type tournament where the majority of the time the best team is going to win 4 out of 7 times. But If you only have one match at one time, anything can happen. An example of that is Great Khan beating Naito. If it was a series, a best 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 7, Naito probably wins that series. But for a one-off, a Great Khan winning this really elevates his character. We've seen him come back from excursion. He's part of the empire, the kingdom, with some of other with his other guys such as Cobb and obviously Will Osprey, the leader of it. I think that it elevates, and because I said Naito, he's almost bulletproof. We'll see him back in the G1, and he'll be contending for the world championship. But for Okan coming back from excursion, that was a big win for him, elevated it. Now Okan losing in the next round to Yano was a little bit kind of killed that, but I understand the concept of what they were trying to do with having him win. Now, Evil did end up emerging from that side of the bracket, and let's move on to Takagi's bracket. Takagi beating Okada highlights that same purpose. Takagi, who was the never open weight champion, has really elevated himself maybe to world title ship contention. And beating Okada was a very good way to do that. Everything I said about Naito, it translates to same exact way to what I said about Okada. Multiple time world champion, legendary guy, really could be a world title contender at any time. But for Takagi to get that win over Okada really put him in a good light. The other side of bracket, David Finlay. Him beating Jay White in the quarterfinals was the biggest upset, I think, in the entire tournament. And what it did, and ultimately, uh, Finlay did lose in the semifinals to Osprey. But for Finlay, a guy that we have seen be with Finn Juice teaming up with Juice Robinson, uh, this was his biggest solo moment in New Japan. And so that was a very good moment for him. And I think his future really more lies with Finn Juice, in my personal opinion. And they're going to maybe try to reclaim the World Tag Championships. But still, that is a nice feather in his cap. And I think Jay White, who will ultimately face, he's going to Tanahashi at some point for that never open weight title, and I think Jay White will eventually win that, Finlay can come back and challenge him for it. So that's a really that's some long term booking that New Japan is doing that I'm very intrigued by. And I think, as I mentioned, Jay White, him facing Tanahashi, and technically Tanahashi has not accepted the the challenge. He keeps rejecting Jay White for that never open weight title. With the merger of the World Championship and the IC Championship to develop the World Heavyweight Championship, you need a secondary singles belt. And I think that never open weight title is going to step that into that void. And having Tanahashi, one of the most decorated guys history of the promotion, and Jay White, one of the young gunners coming forward, I think that's a very good way to promote that belt and make it go from a really secondary belt to maybe the second most important belt in all of the promotion. I know the junior heavyweight championship now held by El Desperado is important, but obviously for that's only half of the roster. You have to be a junior heavyweight to contend for that. Never open weight. The concept of it is you can be any size, have any amount of kilograms or pounds on you. You can fight for the belt. So I think that's a good way to that belt is going to become very popular in the realm of New Japan. I see a heel turn for Hanare. He lost in the first round to Jay White. He's really showing frustration. Hanare is a guy who has always been around, but he always fights in the early part of the card. He wins maybe half of his matches, maybe even a quarter of his matches. He gets pinned a lot. I see a heel turn for him. I'd be very intrigued if he could be in the Empire or the Empire Kingdom with led by Will Osprey. I think that'd be a very intriguing ad or part of them because he has been frustrated and getting a lack of respect. And we're going to find out this weekend who their new member is. Hanare would be very intriguing for me to see that happen. And then the Will Osprey bracket, I thought Sonata would emerge from it, from that bracket. But him losing to Osprey in the quarterfinals was very good. And as I said, I think it's led really to Osprey's big push and and then in transition to the semifinals, was I pull it up here. The Evil versus Takagi. Takagi was able to win that matchup. Osprey versus Finley, tremendous contest there. Osprey won that contest, and Osprey ultimately defeated Takagi to win the New Japan Cup and to have the Empire together was a very strong statement. Another strong statement was Will Osprey turning on Bree Priestley, his girlfriend. He literally knocked her out, and I laugh. I'm not laughing because a woman got hit. It's just that really was a surprise because I guess he was saying that his love of being a world champion trumps anything. That includes his girlfriend, who's been with in real life for multiple years, and we all know the story. Yeah, that was an interesting turn for him to do. I guess it really promoted his heel turn because he's been such a strong face and a happy guy over the past few years. But we've seen the turn ever since he made that turn on Okada to start his new faction. He is really taking a serious tone, and then having Okan and Jeff Cobb with them has really elevated that. And then you really push that forward when you knock out your former girlfriend. So that was very interesting to see what happens there. And as I said, this weekend is Genesis, and the main event is going to be Osprey versus Ibushi for the new World Heavyweight Championship. Personally, I was not a fan of the merging of the Intercontinental title and the World Championship. I thought those two belts served their purposes separately in very good ways. The unification of it that started with the Wrestle Kingdom matchup, and actually interesting, it was Naito's suggestion that they do the merger, and he was able to actually do it and bring the two titles together. Evil beat Naito and had it for a while, but then Naito was ultimately able to get his revenge on it. I thought the double championships was having guys. I thought it'd be the two belts, but defended separately, and we saw a little bit of that when uh, when Ibushi defended the Intercontinental title separately from against Naito, and Ibushi was able to keep the belt. But now it's to the point if it's going to be they're already merged together, I just have to roll with it and accept it. And the merger is good. It does take care of a little bit of awkwardness of a man carrying two belts. I'll give you that. The design of the belt is pretty cool. I like the wings. I guess it harkens back to the older version of the world championship belt. So it looks like a crown or wings. It looks like butterfly wings above the actual middle of the belt. I think that's a nice little touch to it. I like the touch of a little bit of gray on there for the IC belt that was white. And so it's kind of, gray is kind of a merger of the black and the white. So there are parts of the belt that I do enjoy. Ibushi really doesn't do much for me, as far as a champion goes. I think he's very stale. He's very robotic. His in-ring talent is solid, and physically, the man he's a great build. So he looks he's fit. He looks like he's in shape. But just personality wise, he does not do much for me. Okada's the same way, and maybe it's lost in translation because I do not speak Japanese. And but I mean, you see the promos, you can kind of get what they're saying, and then there's translations that you can listen to later on, so you know the language that they use. But I find a lot more like I find Naito very charismatic in his way, as far as being a championship contender. Jay White is tremendous. I think he speaks English. That helps in that regard as far as promos getting things going. I think Tanahashi has a lot of charisma to him with that never open weight title. But whenever I see Ibushi, I just groan, and it's just he does nothing for me as far as in ring. And then this match itself, obviously, I think Ibushi comes in as the heavy favorite. They're not gonna do all of this stuff to just have Ibushi drop the belt to Osprey, even though that would be a nice little surprise to take place. We saw that last year when Evil won the New Japan Cup and beat Naito in an upset, and that was the start of Evil with the Bullet Club. But I think that you're gonna have Ibushi win this championship and keep it for a while. Obviously, if he wins this, he'll keep it to the G1, which is coming up probably within the next few months. But I think that Osprey is a major contender for the championship in the future. For now, I mean, he's the main contender now, but I think in the future you're going to see him stick around. He definitely brings an edge element to it. He brings a certain charisma to the championship. I think his faction is intriguing to me. You have a lot of different flavors in there and a lot of different stuff. And I'm very intrigued to see who the fourth member of the of his empire is going to be. So we'll be checking all of that out as it takes place this weekend. All right, let's transition to AEW wrestling and some things that have been going on in that promotion. And if I'm going back to things that took place a few weeks ago, forgive me because I think that will be we haven't done a verbal submission podcast in a while. So if I bring up things that happened 2 3 weeks ago, we'll just deal with it. But it'll all come together. The things that are currently taking place now. I did see the Kenny Omega John Moxley exploding ring match, and the botch at the end where the ring did not explode like it was supposed to. I think the problem with that type of match is we're supposed to, it's professional wrestling. We know there's suspension of belief and things along those lines. But if you're going to have guys go through barbed wire, and this is going to be another theme when we get to the Thunder Rosa Britt Baker lights out match, and it kind of ties into the same theme. Matter of fact, I'll just bring it up all together. If you're gonna have people go through barbed wires and be hit with bats wrapped in barbed wire and through tables and through all of these different things, and it's not finishes or submissions, it takes me out of the match. Look, we all know that's professional wrestling and it's scripted and there's predetermined things going on, but there should be a realm of reality. If you're hit with a bat that has a barbed wire around it, or if you go through a table that has that with it, or if you go through if you have thumbtacks, which I hate seeing in these type of matches, if you're power bombed or slammed onto thumbtacks and you're pinned and you kick out at 2, that's not realistic. That's not reality of what you're going to have going on in a fight. I look at those type of matches like street fights, and think that I've never been in a street fight like in that regard where you're at a public location, and whether it's a bar or a restaurant or wherever you're at, and you're in a fight against another individual, no rules, no holds barred, and all that type of stuff. But I've heard from enough street fights and seen some street fights just on video and just being a living life. Usually, and I know it's professional wrestling, so these guys are a lot better athletes than the average Joes like myself and others in the world. But usually, if you get punched in the face a few times and you get hit with something glass or something that's sharp, you're not responding as quickly as these people do. So when I'm watching this match with Omega and Moxley, and even more with Rosa and Britt Baker, do I enjoy like I grew up on watching ECW, so I've seen people go through flaming tables, and I said the thumbtacks and the barbed wires, and I've seen all the cuts and bruises and blood and all of the other type of stuff. But it's just not realistic when you put on these certain moves, and it's a 2 count, and it goes on and on and on. I mean that the match between Moxley and Omega was nearly 30 minutes. The Britt Baker Thunder Rosa match is more than 20 minutes. If you're going to have that type of match, 10 minutes max. You get your stuff in, you get the power moves in, you do something incredible, and that ends the match. The fact that you had all that stuff going on in the Moxley and Omega match and one winged angel on a chair was the ultimate move that ended the match when we saw all the hijinks going on before is ridiculous. And same thing with Rosa and Britt Baker. Rosa slammed Britt Baker onto the tax, covered her, and it was a 2 count. Come on. That's just not realistic at all. So when I see that type of stuff, it just is a major turn off for me as far as everything that's going on. The breakup of the inner circle with MJF is interesting. MJF now has a new faction, which includes Wardlow, FTR, Sean Spears, and Tully Blanchard. That's an oak. I guess they're called the Pinnacle. That's okay, but it also think, why does MJF need a faction? And there are too many factions going on in AEW, and confusing factions. We have the Inner Circle led by Jericho. MJF has a faction. Cody Rhodes has a Nightmare Family. And now it looks like QT Marshall, they had their exhibition match this past week. So now Marshall is going to split from the Nightmare Family and I guess have some trainees that we did not know the name of. They just threw them out there on TV in the post-match squash. So now Marshall has a faction. You have this just so many that are going on. Oh, the Bullet Club / Omega, Good Brothers, Don Callis, whatever the heck is going on there. We don't know what the deal is. The Dark Order, and they have a faction. It's just so many of these people and all these groups that it's confusing who's in, who's out, who really wants to be involved, and it's just I don't care is the reality of it. The inner circle and MJF, that's a new thing going on. I'll give them a little bit of time. But do I really care if QT Marshall is now not buddies with Cody Rhodes in this faction going on? No, I really don't care. The whole Bullet Club separation with Omega and now with Omega and the Good Brothers now feuding kind of with the Young Bucks, and then you have Matt Jackson and Don Callis talking. This is all amateur hour stuff. They're like teenagers. I don't care that you didn't too sweet me or give me a hand gesture, or you didn't say hello to me in the back, and all this other stuff. No one cares about that. The biggest thing should be Omega as the world champion. People should be fighting for that and competing for that. And that should be the focus of what's going on. That's why that's why even with Darby Allin with the TNT Championship, now Allen's a little goofy for my taste, with the whole skateboarding and extreme sports thing. But the good part about Darby Allin is that he's the champion, and when he's in there, he's focused on that, and people are aiming to get that belt. Oh, Team Taz, that's another faction. We'll see what happens there. With now it looks like they're kind of beefing, and they have issues with Starks and Brian Cage and Willie Hobbs. It's Will Hobbs, but Jim Ross calls him Willie Hobbs. I'm calling him Willie Hobbs and Hook and that whole group. And there seems like internal tensions there, but it's just so convoluted. All of these things going on, and so that's why I think AEW has some okay moments. As far as kind of once they get to the ring, but I think there's also these internal feuds and tensions that I really do not care about as a grown man. You should be focused on winning championships or winning your match to get more money to put yourself in a better position. And it seems like a lot of these people are feuding over the pettiest things, and it confuses me. And you just don't know who's with who and all that stuff. And I'm online. Do I watch Being the Elite? I used to watch it every week, but I'll catch it every once in a while. But there's also so many references and things to BTE and their stuff on YouTube that they're hardcore fans, those 700,000 or so that watch their show, may be really into because they are going on the YouTube page, they are going to Twitter and watching everything. But when they make references to getting ice cream and the tractor with the Dark Order with Hangman Page, that type of stuff. If I'm just someone who just watches the show, I don't get those references. I don't get that, and that's why they need to translate more. And I think that with all of this internal fighting with these factions, I think if you brought it more towards the stuff you see on they do on their online content, bring it more towards their show on TNT, which is watched by a lot more people, or should be watched by a lot more people, then you would find more intrigue, or the storylines would make more sense. And when they make references to AEW Dark, their weekly show on YouTube, you can't just make a mention of it, and you if you want to build your audience. That's what I think, about that. But we'll see what happens there with AEW as they kind of move on and transition. Oh, I want to mention their new signings and people that they've brought on. Big Show or Paul White. I think it's an okay signing. He's a name guy. I don't need to see him in the ring. I mean, if he wants to do a battle royal, I mean, he's a grown man. I can't tell a man no. But I think that him doing the commentary is a good thing. He has a good personality. Believe it or not, I actually watched the show on Netflix. I guess the Big Show where he's a father to daughters, and they live in Florida, and he lives the life of a retired wrestler and trying to have a balanced family life. It's actually not a bad. It's obviously it's for kids, and the only reason I watched it was because of Big Show. But I ended up watching the whole series, and obviously it's all kid themed stuff, and I really don't vibe with that at all. But he has personality. He's funny. He can crack jokes. Obviously, he could be a serious guy, and I think that'll translate well for him when he's doing the commentary and as a personality for AEW. So I don't mind that signing at all. And I said we just don't need to see him in the ring too much. But if he wants to do the commentary with Shivani on the AEW Dark show, I'm not mad at that. And I've heard some of his stuff. He's okay, but I think that he's a name guy that he's recognizable. So that's not the worst thing in the world. The usage of Sting, it's weird because he's literally legitimately 61 or 62 years old. So obviously he's not going to be out there wrestling every week. Him and Darby Allin have a natural synergy together, obviously with the face paint, the personalities, things like that. So that hasn't been the worst grouping, overall. I saw a street fight or as the staged fight that he had a few weeks ago with the against Team Taz. Not bad. But we'll just see where they kind of go with it because he kind of shows up, he gets you the snow, he makes some statements, and then he walks away. I think that's the lifeline of that is not very long, but we'll see what he does with that as a transition, maybe more towards him being out with someone just outside of Darby Allin. So I'm intrigued by what goes on there. Christian Cage signing with them. Very good match against Kazarian to open up the the last edition of AEW Dynamite. I think that match, while a little long, was started off the show well executed. You saw two professionals in there who have a lot of experience and executed a very solid wrestling match. And obviously, Christian Cage went over, which is obvious, which is what should have been done. I'm just what does Cage give you now? You have to think he's in main contention for the world championship, and we've seen some overtures or some statements or some things expressed as far as Omega and Christian maybe being a title contention match once Omega gets through his bromance drama with the Young Bucks and figures that all out. But yeah, Cage is interesting. The whole outwork everyone. I mean, that's good that he's going to be a good worker, but they need more than just him to be a good, solid worker. They have solid workers on there. Kazarian's a solid worker, a man that he was just in the ring with. He needs to be a charismatic world champion. What Jericho started off with AEW before he kind of went left and started feuding with Orange Cassidy and with MJF, and he's lost in the woods. They need Cage to be a guy, to Christian, to be a competitor that is a legitimate contender for the championship, can cut excellent promos, and be a man that can be a be a grand someone who could be a consistent competitor for the world championship and a serious wrestler that they need because there's a lot of Gaga in AEW, but if Cage is going to be the outwork everyone guy, They need him to be right there in the title picture. I thought this past week was a solid start. You got to see Cage in the ring for the first time in a wrestling match in about 6, 7 years. Yes, I know he was in the Royal Rumble this past year, but that's not really a wrestling match per se. But for him to go in there against Kazarian and look like he did, he looked healthy, he looked good, looked sharp. That's a solid sign. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with him over the next few months. All right, let's transition to WWE and just some quick thoughts on that. It looks like Daniel Bryan has found his way into the main event of WrestleMania to fight for the World Championship. Yeah, the World Championship with the that's currently held by Roman Reigns, and the other contender will be obviously. Uh, one second. Yeah, all right, yeah. So Daniel Bryan has found his way into the main event picture to fight in for WrestleMania. Yeah, so what you're looking at right now is, as we're speaking right during the show, you're going to have Drew McIntyre versus Bobby Lashley for the WWE Championship. I like Drew's match against Sheamus, very physical. Those two guys, you know their history. They can fight for a very long time. I like that matchup. Drew going over was convincing. So now Drew and Bobby Lashley are going to fight for that WWE Championship. I like that matchup. There's good potential build there. Two guys who have been overlooked over the past few years will have the spotlight against each other. When we get more close to WrestleMania, I give you predictions on it, but I like the setup of that matchup. What I was trying to say earlier and was getting all confused and all wrapped up was that Roman Reigns and Edge was initially going to be or was initially going to be the for competition for the Universal title. Daniel Bryan has found his way into that match to make it a three-way. That sounds like some shenanigans already. Uh, I could see Bryan being pinned by Edge, Edge pinning Daniel Bryan, Roman Reigns not even having to be pinned to lose the belt. I don't like three ways in that regard. I think that Edge and Roman Reigns could have carried the main event itself for the Universal title, but they decided to go another direction. And I like Daniel Bryan. We're literally the same age and born on the same day. So our birthday is coming up next month. So I've always supported Daniel Bryan. We're literally born May 22nd, 1981. That's my guy. But I think in this situation, he's kind of shoehorned into this championship match. His match against Roman Reigns, I thought at a Fastlane was very well done. I like the grappling aspect of the match. The fact that he tried to get submissions on Roman Reigns and Reigns was getting frustrated with the traditional wrestling style. Then it got ridiculous with the run-ins. You had Uso run into the match to help Roman Reigns, and you had Edge take out Daniel Bryan because he wanted to be, I guess he wanted to have Roman Reigns for himself in the main event. Stuff like that really messed with the continuity of the matchup, but very intrigued. As I said, I was intrigued with Reigns versus Edge as a singular match, but Daniel Bryan being in there, I'm less intrigued by that. But we'll see what happens there as things are going on. The Alexis Bliss, Randy Orton stuff now with the Fiend, was we saw about a month ago be burnt to a crisp, and we thought he was dead. Now he's back to life. This is just some silliness. I change the channel every time I see Randy Orton and Alexa Bliss. I have no interest in that type of matchup and no interest in seeing that type of competition. But once again, that's what they want to do, and that's just silliness that I am not intrigued by. We'll wrap up the show. One last note: we have not talked mixed martial arts in a while, but I did see the Daniel Ngannou match against Stipe Miocic, and Ngannou is now the undisputed heavyweight champion in the UFC. I think the biggest difference was Ngannou's stamina is so much better than it was in that first matchup. Once traditionally with Ngannou, it was if you get past the first round, he's going to wear out and be tired, and then you can take him out in that regard. But I don't think there's been a heavier hitter in history of UFC than Ngannou. You look at all the early round knockouts the man has, it is and just tremendous. And now he's adding stamina to that. He can go more than one round. That's a very tough deal. He dominated that matchup against Stipe, who is a legitimate all-time UFC heavyweight champion, and I said Ngannou made him look like an amateur. And with just the power that he has, and took him out in the second round in dominant fashion. John Jones, I don't think wants any part of that. Well, I shouldn't say that. Jones is maybe the best fighter of all time without and dominated the light heavyweight division for many years. We all know that he's been wanting to get to heavyweight at some point. Just physically, it's easier for him. He's a big man. But Ngannou brings that power that I don't think Jones can match in that heavyweight division. I think the fight will eventually happen. Jones wants more money, and that's understandable to be get in the cage against a guy like Ngannou, but and that's a fight that needs to be in front of fans. And I know we're talking professional wrestling here, but it was very good to see fans. And Major League Baseball started their season yesterday on April 1st. It was good seeing fans in the stands. And I think you're starting to see a lot more of that. And I think WrestleMania is going to have fans in the stands for their event, and I think we're starting to see more of that. So that's very good. Side note on that, things are getting better as far as having fans attend sporting events. That Jones and Ngannou fight needs to be in front of people. Look, the matches at the Apex Center, I think that's what it's called, in Las Vegas, where the UFC hold the fights. Those are cool. The Fight Island concept is okay, and I'm glad there are fights going on, and I understand the safety of it. But yeah, we're gonna start once we start getting more fans, and within a few months, that Ngannou and John Jones fight needs to be in front of fans, and I think that's going to happen. But as far as the fight itself, I mean Jones, when he's focused and everything is on, he's still maybe the best fighter in the world. But we've seen the past few fights, he has been guys that would have not lasted around with him have taken him to multiple rounds. He's getting older, and that's just the reality of the fight game. And Ngannou is just so focused right now and is so sharp. I think I would have to put Ngannou as a favorite over John Jones, and I don't think Jones has been an underdog in a fight in years. I'm arguably maybe ever. I don't think he's ever been an underdog, or maybe in first fight or two in the UFC. But you get what I'm saying. After he beat up Stephen Bonner a few years ago and announced his arrival really in the UFC, wow, that was back in about 10 years ago at least. I don't think may have been an underdog in any of his fights. I think against Ngannou, you would have to put him in that underdog category. So that is a unique perspective of a fight if you want to go there. But yeah, so that was very interesting to see that fight and just see his dominance there for Ngannou. All right, that concludes today's edition of the Verbal Submission. Thanks for listening to the broadcast. As always, you can go to our social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under Sports Inquirer. And finally, go to YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, wherever you get your audio and video content. Just do a search for us, subscribe, like us, and you'll get everything that we do as it happens. Until next time, good fight, good night, be safe.